So in this demo, I'm going to be looking at the desirability or otherwise of replacing some JQuery code with vanilla JavaScript. And I inherited this project, which has a page in it that looks something like this. Now I can't use the actual code, but I did mock it up in the MVC. So I created what I like to call a data transfer model, also called a view model, of just a class that holds some fake product data. And then in my home controller, I made a list of that type of view model, product list view model, and I initialized these objects into the list with this code here. And then I take that variable, which is called product list, and it's a list of type product list view model, and I pass it to my view. My view is expecting an enumerable of type product list view model. Then I just go through each object in the model, and for each object I emit the row of a table which has the various data points in. And the result of that is this here. So then we're trying to visually present the user with this kind of binary choice with these mouse overs. One binary choice is to add it directly to your cart now. So that's being provoked not by hovering over these cells here, but it's just as soon as we come into this add to cart button, we manage to change the color of all the cells, all the sibling cells to the right. And on here, we've got an apparently similar thing going on, but that's actually being achieved by the hover on the hyperlink. But in the case of the add to cart button, as you can see, not even if we hover over the cell that the add to cart button is in, do we get the mouse over the rest of the row. It's only if we actually go into it. And that is being achieved not with CSS, but by JQuery. If we have a look at the view behind there, we'll see it's inserting this JQuery script, which is telling it to run over the DOM and fetch all the button elements, find their parents, and their parents are going to be a table cell, add the class of ByNowHover, which will send the background yellow, but then find all the next sibling elements, as it were, so all the next table cell elements to the right hand side of that one, and add the ByNowHover class to those as well. And then on the mouse out, we're just reversing what we've done. But if we have a look at what we're relying on to get this functionality, it's jQuery 3.4.1 minified. And if we have a look at that in the File Explorer, we'll see that it's 87 kilobytes. And it turned out that in this particular website, the only thing that we were using jQuery for was this mouse over on the add to cart button. Now, jQuery is handy to be sure, but it's essentially a cross-browser tool, isn't it, to iron out the idiosyncrasies of the various DOMs on the various browsers, the various implementations. But these days, browsers are supposed to be behaving themselves a lot better. I became curious as to whether or not we could get the same effect by just manipulating vanilla JavaScript and where that would leave us with the different browsers. So let's comment out the jQuery that we've got, Control-K-C, and in the layout, we can comment out the reference to the jQuery library, and in Site.cs, ByNowHover was what it was called in the original application I was telling you about. Let's call that yellow cell hover. That's just that background color that we're going to get on the table cells. So the first thing we've got to do here is get a reference to all the buttons in the DOM, which is actually a node list that comes from the query selector all method, is the one that I'm going to use. So we've got, let's just call it cart buttons array. Strictly speaking, not an array, but walks like an array, talks like an array. So let's treat it like an array. And then we want document dot query selector all, and we want those buttons which I get with button type equals submit. And once we've got that node list, or array as I'm calling it, we're going to want to loop through those and add an event listener to each one. So I'm going to say for var I equals 0, from I equals 0 to I is going to be less than the cart buttons array dot length property I++, in the time-honored fashion of programmers all over the world. That will loop through our node list. For each of those, so it's cart buttons array to the I, we are going to want to dot add event listener. What event are we listening for? The mouse over. And we're going to attach a function to the mouse over that we're going to call highlight row. And for now, we're going to do a fake highlight row. So here we'll come down and we'll say function highlight row. And for now, we'll just say alert, hit it, and see if we get something for that. So I've got that running now in Google Developer Tools, and I put a watch on cart buttons array, and you can see that we have got this node list, and as I go over that, you can see it moving here on the left hand side as well. And in the console, I've used the get event listeners method and passed in the third element in the cart buttons array to just make sure that my event listener is on there. And we can see we have got something in the array, and it's a mouse over event, and the listener is highlight row. So we are looking good. So let's just mouse into the add cart button, and as you can see, we've hit the breakpoint inside the highlight row function. And if I go F11, indeed we get the alert box. So that is all picking that up, and we are set fair. So we've obviously got to do something a bit more meaningful with our highlight row method. And what we're going to do is we're going to be able to get a reference to which element in the DOM produced the mouse over event by taking in this mysterious parameter here, which I'm going to call event. And if we look back up to the structure of the table, this is the button where we're going to get the mouse over, and it's got a parent, which is the table cell that it's in, this TD here. And that table cell has got a parent, which is the table row that contains it. So we can back work that relationship in the code. And we can come in here and say, let's call it var, and it's the grandparent row that we're after. So let's call it grandparent row, and that's going to be equal to the thing that produced the mouse over, the event.target dot parent element will get us into the TD, and then we want the parent element of that will get us back to the row in the table. And then having got the reference to the row, we can then do something similar to this and iterate through its children to get references to the table elements. So I'm going to copy this and put this in here, except that this isn't going to be cart buttons array anymore. We're going to have to invent a variable for this. So let's have variable called cells array. And that's going to be the grandparent row dot children. And so now we're going to want to iterate through the children of the grandparent row. So let's pick up that. This is going to be now cells array, and this is going to be cells array. And of course, we're not adding a mouse over. What we're doing here is adding the color that we want those cells to go. We need to say cells array to the I, class list dot add yellow cell hover. So we have on the highlight row, we've reached into the element that produced the mouse over, and we've used that to get a reference to its grandparents. We're iterating through the children of the grandparents, and we are adding the new class to each one. So let's run that and see what we get. So here we are getting something. As I mouse over the add to cart, it is receiving the new class, so that looks good. But of course, it's not mousing out again, is it? Once it's there, we're stuck with it forever, and that's because we need to set up the mouse out event as well to take that class back off again. And having come so far, that's really not such a biggie. All we've got to do is get these buttons to listen to the mouse out event as well as the mouse over. So I can come in here, copy that line, and change this to mouse out. And then we're going to have to invent another function. Let's call it unhighlight row to do on the mouse out. And the unhighlight row function is going to be somewhat similar to the highlight row function. So let's see if we can copy that and then just make some changes to it. Obviously, it's got to be called unhighlight row. So in the same way, we get the reference to the grandparent row, so that should all work. And then we get a reference to its children. And then all we've got, the only difference we've really got here is that instead of adding the class, we want to class list remove. And that's got a fairly good chance of working. Don't need to compile, so I can just save that, go back to the view, refresh the browser, and here we go. And now we've got it coming in and out now. We've got the complete mouse over. But in fact, there's one slight problem, because if you look to the left of the add to the cart button as I go down, we're getting the mouse over the cell to the left of the add cart button. It's because on all these iterations, we just need to start on cell index 1, i.e. the second cell, instead of the first. And there it is, mouse over and mouse out, just affecting the cells that we want it to be affected. And now that is our mouse over completely without jQuery, just with vanilla JavaScript. So far we've been using Chrome and everything looks as if it's good to go. But what about previous versions of browsers? Well, what was jQuery 3.4.1 buying us at the end of the day? If we look at the browser support, what it was essentially doing for us was bringing us into line with Internet Explorer 9, 10 and 11. So we really ought to check how we're doing with those three. So I've got the same page here open in Internet Explorer 11, and we look to be okay there. So if I come across here on Internet Explorer's F12 developer tools, we've got emulation for previous versions. So let's change that to version 10, and we look okay in version 10. So what about, fingers crossed, version 9, which is what jQuery was kind of buying us? And here, bum, 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 it hits the debugger, and it looks, at the very least, we've got a problem with the class list. I'm fairly confident that we can fix this issue for Internet Explorer 9, but it is worthwhile to at least pause and consider whether it really is worth the developer time to do that, I've come to caniuse.com, and according to their statistics, at the moment, towards the end of 2019, only 0.23% of people worldwide are using Internet Explorer 9. So that's approximately 1 in 400 people that aren't going to be able to see our wonderful mouseover. So are we worried about 1 in 400 people not being able to see this? So just supposing for the moment that we do care about those 1 in 400 users, then let's have a look what we can do about it. And the solution is to use the class name property, which Internet Explorer 9 does support. So the only thing we've got an issue is with this class list here. So let's come in and do a conditional here. And we can sense if the browser is supporting the class list property by simply saying here, if cells array to the I dot class list, and that'll just return true if that's not null or undefined, and then this block will execute. So then we'll want the same block, the same line of code that we had before in here. But if not, we're going to want the class name instead. Cells array to the I dot class name equals and the same. And then similarly, on the remove part of it, we're going to want something that looks a bit similar. So let's, for the moment, copy that and put it in here. If class list is supported, then we can just use the remove method here, or if not, then we can just set the class name to an empty string, and that should be all we need. So let's flip the browser over to Internet Explorer again, Control F5 to run the project. And as you can see, we're still okay there. So let's hit F12 to get the developer tools for Internet Explorer. Let's crank it down to 10. How are we looking? We're still okay in 10, well we were before. Now here's the acid test. Cross all my fingers and toes. Ba-ba! And there we are, compliant with Internet Explorer 9. I don't suppose we'll do very well in Internet Explorer 8. And yes, we start to have problems there with the add event listener method, which is a modern browser method. Now, in no way do I want to belittle the awesome work that's been done both on and with JQuery over the years. But at the same time, there are network and code latency issues involved. So if our UI needs are modest, and as we've hopefully left the browser wars behind us now, we can certainly entertain more thoughts of vanilla JavaScript.